It's the final lesson of this module, and in this lesson, we'll extend what you've learned so far into making a slightly more complex nested layout. By a nested layout, I just mean something like this. It's actually quite simple. So this is where we have only one section. You can see that because it has a background color set on it. But inside the section, we have multiple column layouts. There are two of them here. There's a one column for the headline, and then under that, there's another set of columns, this time a 3-column layout. In some nested layouts, you could have even more columns, like a 2-column as well. But to keep things really simple here, we have 2 different column layouts nested inside one overall section. Let's get cracking making it. In this lesson then, first we'll create a multi-column layout within a single section. While we're at it, I'll show you how to make an entire column clickable. I'll also show you how to make all the text white in a section, all in one go. You'll get more practice making content centered, this time with a more complex structure. And finally, you'll see how to adjust the spacing between the 2 rows in our nested layout. As always, add a new section. I always like to check it's landed in the right place in the structure panel. I'll immediately pop a dark background color on this one. That can be our accent BG in the color palette. Now we need to essentially create 2 rows. And one really easy way to do that is to just have 2 containers inside the same section, 1 container for each row. So if I come over to the structure panel, here's the single container that Bricks adds automatically. I'll just duplicate it. A reminder, you can use the right-click menu or the keyboard shortcut. And there you are, 2 rows. Now there are other ways to do this, but this approach is not only really easy, but it also gives us maximum flexibility to adapt the layout later if we want to, without later having to create extra elements. Okay, a heading in the first row. Again, I'll use the Command E shortcut for the Elements panel. Select it. Make it H2. I'll attend to the color and the alignment soon. The text can be Happy Customers. Notice that we don't need a column here. The heading by itself is just fine. Now the next row is a 3-column layout, and we do need columns or blocks here because each column has multiple elements in it. There's going to be an image, a heading, some text, a button in each column. And so we're going to need to wrap all those elements in a block so that we can lay them out in 3 columns. Okay, so we'll click on the next container, click the layout icon, 3 columns. And there we go. Now we see the columns in the structure panel. I'll select the first one. I'll come to Elements and add an image, a heading, a rich text element, and a button. Okay, you've seen me adding images and overwriting text a few times now, so for speed, I'm going to fast forward me adding the actual content. So that's the content added. I also popped a bottom margin of 1 rem on the image and the same on the text. And the button I set to the small size. Now I'm just going to duplicate this column to make our 3 columns. And I can right-click the original 2 columns again and delete them. We don't need them now. I won't bother overwriting any more text for this exercise, but I will replace the images with these that I previously added to my media library. I'll pop all the images below the video. Next, sometimes for some layouts, you might not need column gap. We do here though, and you know the drill by now, we need to edit the parent of the columns. That's the container. Again, set a column gap of 2.5 rem. And that's it for the basic nested layout. So we effectively created 2 rows by having 2 containers, which gives us lots of flexibility to put whatever column layouts we want to inside them. Plus, because we wanted these 3 columns side by side, it was easy to just edit the column's direct parent element because we already had it in place. That was the second container. Also, if you're wondering if it's possible to make the entire column clickable to one URL, yes it is. Quite easy actually. Select the column, or the block as it really is. Then in the settings, just set the HTML tag to a link. You can then set whatever kind of link you want. Just be aware though that if you do that, you must make sure that none of the individual elements inside the block have links set on them, or you'll make your visitor's computer explode. All right, not really, but it will cause problems with links not working properly. Okay, we have a couple more styling tweaks to make here before we're done. Because the section has a dark background color, I'd like all the text to be white instead, just so it's easy to read. That's really easy, actually. You don't need to individually set every element to white. Come up to select the entire section, into Style, Typography, and Color, and set all typography in this section to white. Boom. There you go. Again, once more, this is something that we're going to be able to automate with classes later on, as you're no doubt tired of hearing me say now. Let's center the content as well. So we come into the Content tab for the section, and I'll choose to align center on the cross axis. Nothing's happened. Why is that? Well, that's because the direct children of the section are the two containers. Flex only affects the direct children of the element that you're setting it on, remember? So to center the heading, we have to edit the container the heading is inside. I'll quickly remove that setting I just made. And once again, it's the direct contents of this container we want to center. Then I'll come and set Flex Align Center on the cross axis. Now this looks centered just fine because the box that is the heading element isn't very wide. But to be safe, let's just make sure that the actual text typography of everything in this container is center aligned as well. And that'll now always look centered, no matter even if later on the heading runs to multiple lines. And the next container. Now in the second row, the situation is a little bit different. Which elements do we want to center? Well, that's the heading, the image, the text, and the button. And so, you know by now, we have to select their direct parent. That's the column in this case. So with the column selected, I'm going to come over and set Flex Align Center and also Typography Text Align Center as well. And there you go. Again, this is going to be much quicker and much easier with classes because, well, you get the picture by now, I know. And in fact, classes will also make it 10 times quicker to set the same styles on the other two columns as well. But for now, I'm just going to fast forward the video a bit past me doing it the manual way. Final thing, I would like a touch more space between the first container row and the second container row. Well, that's row gap, as you know, and to set that, I'd have to come up to the parent of the two containers. That's the section in this case. I want to add row gap between the two containers. And then set row gap here. Let's try 1 rem. And that's added that 1 rem row gap between the two containers, which are the direct children of the section we are currently editing. Make sense? Your job now is, you guessed it, to create this nested section yourself. Remember, we added a background color on the section and created each row with a container. The copy and images are below the video. And for bonus points, try editing this section for responsive and see how you get on. And that's it for this module. Wow, you've done well. And you've learned a ton about building layouts with Bricks and Flex. If you don't know exactly how to create every possible layout in future, doesn't matter. With the core skills you've learned here, you should be well on the way to being able to figure it out for yourself. Before we move on to Module 4, I see that Bricks has just released their first implementation of CSS Grid. So move on to the next lesson for a quick primer on using CSS Grid to create more flexible column grid layouts. See you then.